Numbers that leave UVM students Sarah Wood and Maxine Flordelisa pretty skeptical that men are just treading water.
And I think it's really interesting that there is kind of like a big fuss about, like, not a fuss, but it's a conversation that people are having, but I don't think it's necessarily a problem.
I think that just the fact that the playing field has been a little bit more evened out shouldn't be the reason as to why men don't really know where they fit.
Welcome to Manosphere Highlights Daily. CBS News recently published a compelling video titled The Effect of Gender Disparities on Men, signaling a growing recognition that men's issues can no longer be overlooked. While the acknowledgement of some men's issues is a step forward, the video stops short of revealing the truth about the root causes behind these challenges. We're going to uncover the truth behind the smokescreen. Now it's time for us to get into this and do what we gotta do. Because we men, ain't we? We men, ain't we?
It wasn't so long ago that men enjoyed a clear advantage in American society. But these days, a different story is emerging. Men and boys falling behind, and sometimes into despair. Lee Cowan takes a closer look.
It starts right here, guys. Men enjoyed a clear advantage in American society. Under what circumstances? Under what premise? They do the same thing with the Barbie movie. No context. Patriarchy is evil, just because.
By giving voice to the cognitive dissonance required to be a woman under the patriarchy, you robbed it of its power.
Yes.
They are trying to sound intelligent, but just take a closer look and the holes in their arguments are easily spotted. Let's continue.
At the University of Vermont not too long ago, it was move-in day for the class of 2027.
This is from my hometown.
About 1,000 incoming freshmen were meeting their roommates, finding their dorm rooms, and just generally getting settled on campus.
592 is that pay.
Now, you'd be forgiven if at first glance you thought that this was an all-women's college. Well, 62% of this year's class are women.
Josie, what's your roommate's name?
And that's a gender gap that has earned Burlington, Vermont, a nickname, Girlington.
You see 6 or 7 women for every 3 or 4 men.
Yeah. As UVM's vice provost for enrollment, Jay Jacobs' job is all about student diversity. And these days, the male-female divide is now part of that equation.
Sure, I thought about racial and ethnic diversity. Right. Sure, at a public flagship in the state of Vermont, I've thought about geographic diversity, never gender diversity like that.
But that's where we are.
That's where we are.
UVM, though, is hardly an outlier. Nationwide, women do make up almost 60% of college undergraduates. In 1972, when Title IX was passed to help improve gender equality on campus, men were 13 percentage points more likely to get an undergraduate degree than women. Today, though, it's women who are 15 percentage points more likely to get a degree than men.
This is your answer right here, guys. They changed the entire school system so women could thrive, but at the expense of men. They did not only change the school system, but society in general. This is why we also highlight movies, because they are not just movies. Media has the power to shape cultural attitudes and expectations. Why do you think Barbie moves to the real world to get a vagina at the end of the movie instead of staying in the perfect utopia Barbie land and living happily ever after with Ken? It's not about unity, and it's definitely not about empowering men. Check this out.
So we have a bigger gender gap today than we did when we passed laws to help women and girls. It's just flipped.
Richard Reeves is a Brookings Institution senior fellow, and he says, shockingly, no one has really been able to explain why so many men are so absent in higher education. What is known is the gender disparity starts pretty early as kindergarten, where girls are just generally the stronger sex in academics.
Bull crap. The moment you see Richard Reeves, you know you're going to get a politically correct advocate for men. that tiptoes around the root causes of the problem, so he won't get canceled and sell his book. What do you mean nobody has been able to explain why so many men are absent in higher education? We did a review of Dr. Helen Smith's book called Men on Strike, and there's a chapter called The College Strike, where the boys aren't. And it literally begins with "Welcome to Girlington." Janice, read.
Young men are not going to whine about their predicament. They are not going to organize workshops or support groups. Thank goodness, teenage boys are the one group of Americans who do not like to gather in circles and talk about grievances and misgivings. So what will they do? My guess is that vast numbers will just stop trying and withdraw. It would not be an organized strike, it would just happen. It is happening. Christina Hoff Sommers, in an interview with the author.
You see, this is not a mystery. The truth needs to remain unspoken. Dr. Helen Smith also talks about guys like Richard Reeves. Janice, read.
The problem today is that society is not listening to what men have to say if they do open up, and, at the same time, the risks for men in talking about these politically charged issues keep them silent, making it hard to glean the truth. Even those experts or authors who write books on the topic of male reluctance to marry and who profess to be somewhat pro-male seem to get it wrong. What they don't realize is that the incentives to marry have changed for men, and they are no longer willing to risk so much more than in previous years to gain potentially so much less.
Richard Reeves knows the truth, and if he would expose the truth, he would not be on television. He's a politically correct men's advocate, and unfortunately, that's the only way men's issues can get some exposure in the mainstream media, even though the manosphere has gone mainstream and our talking points can no longer be denied.
If you look at high school GPA and those who are getting the best grades in high school, 2/3 of them are girls. Those with the lowest grades, 2/3 of them are boys.
It's been theorized that girls and women are just really fulfilling their destiny, that once the limitations on their achievements were lifted, they soared.
You see how they spin it? Once their limitations were lifted, they soared. Women are fulfilling their destiny. Women were never meant to bear children. How dare nature curse them with this burden? The foolishness. Their destiny was always to join the labor force and compete with men.
Reeves, though, is so worried that he's launched the American Institute for Boys and Men because he fears that things have changed so fast, it's left many boys and men struggling to catch up, not just in the classroom, but at work and at home, too.
What does it mean to be a successful man today? That was a question that was pretty easy to answer a generation or two ago. But actually, what is the answer today? And a lot of these guys just don't know.
In short, he says, millions of boys and men don't understand how or where they fit anymore. And the reaction is to generally disconnect. Men's participation in the labor market, for example, has dropped more than 7 percentage points just in the last 50 years. 21% of men report binge drinking. That's almost double the rate of women. And men account for nearly 80% of suicide deaths. That's 4 times the rate for women.
The two most commonly used words by suicidal men to describe themselves were useless and worthless.
But even to suggest there's some kind of male crisis these days is pretty perilous.
Merely raising it will cause people to eye roll and say, really? 10,000 years of patriarchy? Now you're worried?
After all, women still earn only about 80 cents for every dollar earned by a man. Only a fraction of CEOs in the Fortune 500 are women. And they make up just a quarter of the members of Congress. And so far, no U.S. presidents.
There we go. They just had to use that ridiculous gender pay gap that has been debunked many times. In that Barbie movie, we also exposed how there are more female CEOs than female garbage collectors. So their so-called equality objective is solely focused on top positions, and that's why men's issues cannot be fully addressed because women thrive at the expense of men. Men are the workers, builders, protectors, and providers of society. And without restrictions, without handicaps, we will naturally outshine women in this field. Nature created us to do this, to excel in this area. That's why we keep reminding you, we men, ain't we? Western society is doing everything to castrate men. Of course, men will naturally opt out if there's no incentive to participate. The numbers don't lie, but the mainstream media is not going to tell you the truth. Take your red pill vitamins.
Numbers that leave UVM students Sarah Wood and Maxine Flordeliza pretty skeptical that men are just treading water.
And I think it's really interesting that there is kind of like a big fuss about, like, not a fuss, but it's a conversation that people are having, but I don't think it's necessarily a problem.
I think that just the fact that the playing field has been a little bit more evened out shouldn't be the reason as to why men don't really know where they fit.
You see it on these podcasts, how women are easily schooled on this topic because they are misinformed and take the way society functions for granted. Even playing field? Stop it. Check this out. AI will take more jobs from women than men by 2030, report says. This headline reflects the ever-changing landscape of society. Janice, read.
Healthcare, STEM fields and construction are expected to boom. Workers in customer and food services, office support and production roles could suffer. According to the report, by 2030, at least 12 million workers will need to change jobs as the industries in which they work shrink, 25% more than the institute predicted in a report published in February 2021. Most of those workers will be at the low end of the pay scale, and they probably will need to acquire new skills before they can transition into new industries.
Historical technological advances, such as the birth control pill and industrialization, opened doors for women to significantly participate in the workforce. But as this article suggests, advances in technology, particularly artificial intelligence, are introducing a new phase in which jobs held by women are at risk. This dynamic illustrates the cyclical nature of technology's impact on the roles of men and women in the workforce. One moment it presents opportunities, and the next it can reshape the landscape. When the catastrophe happens, women will be asking, where did all the men go?
Sure, do we need to do more to encourage more women into politics and into boardrooms? Yes. But meanwhile, can I not see that one group is struggling here and another group is struggling there? And if I can't do that, we're in really deep trouble.
And those in the most trouble, he says, are working class and African American boys and men.
Before, it used to be you graduated high school, goodbye, you're on your own. A lot of people said, hey, you're out of my house, or it's time for you to go. But we're understanding now that those supports need to continue. Principal Hill, how are you?
I'm wonderful.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
Vaughn Washington is with the Kalamazoo Promise in Michigan. It's a program that offers high school graduates in Kalamazoo scholarships covering up to the entire cost of in-state college tuition. The impact? Well, the number of Kalamazoo women getting a college degree did increase by about 45%. But the number of Kalamazoo men getting college degrees didn't budge.
We're working with them, we're talking to them, we're trying to find out what is it that even with this opportunity, you have some of the same challenges as someone in another community that doesn't have this opportunity.
Come on, man. Stop acting like this is some mystery that needs to be solved. We all know we cannot hold these single mothers accountable for doing a terrible job raising their sons. In our brick face video, we talked about how boys are neglected at home, and it's nothing new under the sun. Take a look at the titles of these articles. Many of America's black youth cannot read or do math, and that imperils us all. Black boys in crisis, they aren't reading. Or data exclusive, 75% of black California boys don't meet state reading standards. These articles reveal a lot about their upbringing and how it affects girls differently from boys. Mothers raise their sons differently than their daughters. These single mothers take credit when their sons go to the NBA, but they blame their fathers when their sons go to prison. We've seen what happens when women are held accountable.
One solution, though, that does seem to be working is making sure that those men who are struggling have a place to freely admit they're struggling.
Do he have a cell number you can give me?
Staffers with the Promise are tracking down those men still eligible for the scholarship, finding out why they never used it, and helping them get what they need to finally do it. Like Daniel Joffrey.
I just started wandering around in life and doing random jobs, getting tired of random jobs, and
We welcome you here to the Kalamazoo Promise.
now I'm here.
Need help up here?
He joined with dozens of other men at what the Promise was calling the Males of Promise event.
It's important that you put something positive out here on your name and on your future.
It was as much straight talk as it was straight out party. Dennis Martin graduated high school 6 years ago. He says had the Promise not tracked him down, he might not have realized that he was indeed ready for something more.
I feel like now I have the discipline to be in a 5-year program or 4-year program, but as a kid, I feel like I was still bouncing off the walls and my mind didn't know what exactly is out there.
This is why it's essential that the father is in the house, but also in school. Most teachers are females. The data and statistics confirm boys and girls are better off with a father in the house. Nowhere in this video parents are mentioned. Nowhere in this video is mentioned that the school system sucks for boys. It's designed for women to thrive. These guys have scholarships and they don't want to go to school. The damage is done at a young age.
Back at UVM, administrators have changed their marketing and communication strategies to reach out to men, especially those who might not think they want to go to college at all. The college is also hiring a diversity coordinator to focus specifically on helping men.
The world was built for people like you and me to succeed, so why do we need to help men succeed here on our campus even more? But I think once people start to understand the nuances of the challenges that we're talking about here today, Lee, people understand that all students need support.
Junior Lucas Romer doesn't see it as some kind of affirmative action, putting the finger on the scale for men. He sees it as a way to help anyone who's been hanging on and feeling left out.
I think there's ways to promote both femininity and masculinity on campus equally well. I think there's definitely a path forward that would be beneficial to everybody.
The coordinator of the Men and Masculinities program will be housed right here in the Women and Gender Equity Center. Now that's pretty ironic to some, but it's also a recognition that men's problems can indeed coexist with those of women.
You lift the edges up, the center will be lifted up as well. And here, the edges include men.
It's the kind of reaction to a very real problem of boys and men that Richard Reeves says needs now to be the rule and not the exception.
This is not a made-up crisis of masculinity. This is an actual hard fact. There's real suffering here, and if we don't address real suffering, then what are we here for?
Management, we working. Protect yourself at all times. This video has officially been highlighted.